I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Cheryl Carey, and I am the Tech and Membership Coordinator. And I also have my own company called Safe Care Consulting. And I'm really glad to have y'all here with me today. I am going to start sharing my screen. Are y'all able to see my screen now?
Excellent.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. And let me just set up for just a second. Okay. Okay, so I'm really glad to have y'all here today. Our topic today is going to be icebreakers, and we are going to, oh gosh, see if I can get this to work. We are going to be talking about these. What inspired me about doing this training is whenever we're writing a training, we always ask to kind of ask ourselves, like, how do we get started? Like, what's the first thing that we're going to do? And it's kind of like having that first impression with trainings. And so today, our learning objectives are going to be to define what icebreakers are, to recognize the positive and negative effects of icebreakers for trainings, to apply adult learning theory to the use of icebreakers, and then to create an icebreaker toolbox with a variety of icebreaker activities that I hope you will be able to use in your upcoming trainings. So let's take a moment and get to know one another. This is one of the icebreakers that I like to use when doing a virtual and then also in person, depending upon the number of people that are in your training. So I'd like to ask you to introduce yourself and share where you are. Second, tell us how long you've been in training. And then do you have a favorite get to know you icebreaker that you've used in your trainings? Judith, do you mind going first?
No, ma'am. I am Judith Lee. I am located in El Paso, Texas. I have been training for a couple of years. Officially, I would say about 7 years now. I started with training with the military, but before that, I always did training here and there, nothing very official, but officially with the military 7 years ago. And I don't normally have a favorite icebreaker. It's been military, military training is very, this is what you're doing, this is what we're learning, sit there and learn it. So I've had to adapt to make sure that the military training is different from civilian training. So normally I would be like, well, introduce yourself, and where do you work? Or what age group of children are you working with? Something very simple like that, but nothing official.
And Melissa, can you introduce yourself?
Yep. My name is Melissa Ply, and I've been training for a couple of decades. And I live in Temple, Texas. And I also used to work with military. I was with the training curriculum specialist, which was one of the funnest jobs you can have. And the get to know you, I like it to where you have a question and it's like if you could be an animal, which one would you be? Or something that's like related to the training, what we're talking about, doing a poll with them, just kind of thinking outside of the box a little bit with getting them to kind of, if we're talking about responsive caregiving practices, it's like, what is childhood memory that you have? Some kind of connection back to a personal to kind of pull at their heartstrings before we get going, have them make kind of a connection.
Great. And again, my name is Cheryl Carey, and I am in Austin, Texas. And I have been training for probably about 10 years. But during that time, about 5 of it, I was actually in more of a office job. And so I was not doing as much training. So I like to think I'm probably more at about 5 years, give or take, although I've been in the field for a long time. One of my favorite get to know you icebreakers, I think, is asking for the group to stand up. And then if they've been with us for a certain in the field for a certain amount of time, 1 to 3 years, have a seat. If you've been in 3 to 5 years, have a seat. And then at the very end, you're usually left with a teacher or a director who has been in the field of work for 15, 20 plus years. And it's really an opportunity to acknowledge them, to recognize them, and to celebrate their commitment to the field. And I think it also allows people in the group to see someone who's been in it so long, and even maybe see their self, trying to work towards that for their future. So that's one of my favorite icebreakers. And again, one of my inspirations for this training is I like to use this one, but even thinking and doing other ones. And Melissa, you shared some really good creative ideas. And so our training today is really going to be about us sharing ideas. And I hope that this is a training that I'll offer ongoing, so that each time we're getting more ideas and being able to help each other to have higher quality trainings that have kind of fun, creative starts to our trainings. Okay, so I want to begin with some key adult learning principles. One is adults that are motivated to learn when they see the relevance to their lives. Number two, experience is a valuable resource for learning environments. And this is kind of what I talk about, is like, being able to look around a room and see the experience helps us to see just how much knowledge and experiences in our training group and that we can build, that we can pull from. Number three, adults are ready to learn when they perceive a need for new knowledge or skills. This is really important for us to know, like, kind of where our training group is at, because a training group may be required to be there for training, and they may not be perceiving that there's a need for them to be there, or they may be motivated to be there knowing that what they are being trained on is something that they do want to have that new knowledge or skills and the opportunity to learn about. And our fourth one is just adults orientation to learning is problem centered and goal oriented, and just recognizing what adults need as a part of their learning to be able to benefit by the training or the activities that we're offering. And if I say something that y'all would like to add to or build on, please feel free to join me in sharing information about this training. Icebreakers are defined as fun activities that may ease the stress and anxiety of meeting new people. They're also valuable techniques for team meetings because they can help build the skills necessary for effective teamwork. And so when we're in a training, I think we're going to have usually one of two groups. One is going to be a group that is coming to like a conference or to a training that is open. And it's going to be a group of people that may know some people, but are really coming to an unfamiliar group of people. And the second would be is if we're actually going out to a center and we're providing a training where in fact it is a team that works together and knows each other and may have more of a familiarity to where they're willing to work together. So today we're going to kind of be setting the stage and kind of talking about what we need to know, what we need to do when leading up to choosing a icebreaker. And then towards the end of our training, we'll actually spend some time talking about different types of icebreakers and giving some examples and kind of sharing our experience with icebreakers. So now that we've defined it and we kind of have an idea of what two different types of groups might be that we would work with, let's go on to talk about what do you think are some reasons that icebreakers do have a positive effect on training? Can either of y'all give 3 to 5 reasons? Since it's just the three of us, we'll go ahead and talk out loud.
Oh, Miss Mel, are you talking?
No, I just laughed. I said everybody gets one reason. Maybe three.
Oh, I think that they have a positive effect because one, you have everybody who's in the room kind of meet each other. Maybe they do work together, maybe they don't. Maybe they I'll give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, I trained for our agency, and I did a virtual training because they were in Dallas. So they got the 3 or 5 different schools, or part of the organization together. So all these people didn't necessarily meet each other. So when you have them intermingle, whether it's verbally or standing up and moving around, it lets somebody meet somebody new. You know, it gives them the opportunity to see new experiences, hear new stories, and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think the connection that, to me, you're maybe more comfortable in a training to share or to kind of engage with the partners at the table if you've made some kind of connection beforehand with the content.
I would agree. I think, and I have here 8 different reasons why I thought these were really could be very helpful. We've already touched on building connections, strengthening the group as a helping them to be a stronger team. And like you mentioned, I also did a training where it was one organization, but they had different locations and they brought them together. But it helps them also to see um, themselves as a whole and not necessarily as just different places or different parts. It helps them to see that their cultures are different, but they're still the same program. They still follow a lot of the same rules, policies, and procedures, so they can see where they're similar, but also um, come to appreciate how they're different as well. Um, Icebreakers can be fun and energetic, and if done correctly, they are very engaging. Trainers can also build rapport with participants. Again, it's kind of like making a first impression. If you come out in your training and you're kind of monotoned or not really showing like you're there to want to be there and to want to engage and to build those relationships, then that can almost be I want to say deal breaker when it comes to a training. I like to approach my trainings and be like, I'm really excited to be here with you today and really want them to know that it was my choice to be there and I want to engage with them. And I want to have activities and information that I believe is going to help them. So I think that helps us to build a rapport. Um, with the example that I gave about asking participants to stand up, I think it lets us empower and recognize what participants' roles are or what the commitment that they've made to the field. It can also be inspiring to new members of our training. They can be used in different settings. So icebreakers are very varied. They can be in work, they can be in education, a setting, they can be in social. They also help us to replace silence. They can create that conversation, interactions. Um, they build opportunities for collaboration and peer learning. And then when done correctly, it also helps to support a safe and supportive environment for sharing, where maybe if we build the trust in the icebreaker, then our participants are going to be more willing to share as we move on into the training itself. Do y'all want to add any other ideas that you think are positive for icebreakers?
I think it allows too for gentle entry, like sometimes people are running late and it kind of gives you a bit of leeway time before you get into your content.
I think you're right. That is great. It's a great point. Okay. Icebreakers can go very wrong. And this is something that we have to be really mindful of. It can be boring. It can actually have the opposite effect of all the things that we just talked about. Instead of being engaging, it could be not engaging or boring, or it could be insensitive. It may be irrelevant. It could be inappropriate for the setting. And it can actually ask too much. We maybe could ask questions where people feel like we're asking for too much personal information, and we need to be mindful of making those mistakes. And also time management. Whether your training is an hour, hour and a half, or 2 hours, that's time that should be spent training. That's what the expectation is. And so when we come and we start doing icebreakers and activities that take away from the training, then we're actually doing a disservice to our participants. So we also want to make sure that it does align with our training and it's relatable and that it's actually a learning opportunity done in a fun way that adds to our training. Can y'all think of any other ways that an icebreaker could go wrong?
People could be offended. So you might think you're going with this, or the content, the question is taking you away in one direction, and then it's hard to reclaim. And so that time management, I think people, they go very long for sometimes.
And I think when we talk about being offended, not only can we offend somebody, but also just the thought that it could lead to a conversation where participants in the training themselves offend each other. And then we are in a position to try to kind of make that resolution or work through that conflict that might arise. Another thing that can go wrong with an icebreaker is if we're asking questions and we have somebody who starts to talk too long, and it starts again to take away from our time, and we have to be able to, in a very professional, sensitive way, to transition and bring the training back to our time limit line, so that we don't lose that. So we want to ask questions that elicit responses, but we also want to be mindful that we're asking questions that have simple answers, or that we're able to keep control of our training. Okay. And so that also kind of leads me to what I thought this was a kind of funny slide to add. And that is, what did the rug say to the floor? Do not move. I have got you covered. So sometimes when we think we're being funny, some of our group may be like, okay, that was just really corny and that wasn't really necessary. Or you may find some of our members actually do enjoy it. But we just want to really be mindful that what we are doing truly is relatable, aligns with our training, and it adds to the learning and doesn't take away. Okay, so now we're going to continue on, and we're going to look at, what do you need to know about your audience and your training logistics when you're planning an icebreaker? Do y'all want to add some ideas that you can think of to start with?
My first question is room setup. Like,
Yes.
where all the chairs are in a line, is there a table? Like, sometimes there's some great interactive activities, but not realistic to get them up, and kind of how to work the room.
Mm-hmm. And I think, yeah, when you ask about the layout of the room, are the chairs in rows? Are they at tables? Is it a square table? Is it a round table? Like, what kind of tables and what kind of engaged or interactions is it going to allow for? Is it a small room, a large room? Is there space and opportunity to move around in the room?
I think one of the other things that we need to look at is what at the audience themselves, culturally, diversity, way, language, that is a big one, because if you start off wrong there, the rest of your training, it doesn't matter how good of a trainer you are, it doesn't matter how well your content is, that can just take a downturn very quickly.
I agree. So so the first one I have here is also to make sure that we're addressing the training details before we transition into our icebreaker. You want to let people know kind of like the length of the training, where's the location of the bathrooms, kind of like what they can expect, because if you go right into the icebreaker, they may be in their mind thinking like, okay, well, where are the bathrooms, or where is this that I need to go, or what is going to, so they just need to have a little bit of information before you transition in. And then Judith, like you said, the demographics of our audience is really important. And we need to know these things beforehand. Like, if you are looking at language, how can you support multiple languages? Or if it is cultural, then, what can you offer in your training that is going to recognize more different cultures, and make people feel like they're included, and that, you don't risk the chance of offending somebody. Group size. And I think when it comes to group size, this is really tricky, because it's kind of like a wedding when you think 100 or plus people are going to come and you have 50, or if you think a training might have, 50 and you end up with 25 or 30, or you're 25 and you have 5 to 10. Like, you have to be able to adapt what your icebreaker is to whatever group size presents the day of training, despite what you might expect in terms of what you've been told. The floor plan and the seating, rows of seats or tables, space for participants to engage in movement activities. I recently had a training where, actually, this was really kind of a fun activity. It was an emergency preparedness training, and I found through FEMA that they have cards, and there's two sets of cards. One set of cards was a need, and it was like a flashlight or batteries or different things that you might, I'm sorry, did I say that right? No, I'm sorry. A need, like um, I need light, or I need power. I need uh, a place to go for shelter. So you talk about the one group had the cards that said the need, and then another group had the resource. So the person who needed light looked for the person who had a flashlight. So that kind of makes sense the way I described it. But what happened with this is that the two groups had to be able to walk around and move around and talk with each other. And so the room had to have that kind of space to allow them that movement. And we need to know that before we do an activity like that, that the room allows for it. You could also, if it's like after lunch, you might want to have them doing stretches or actual physical activity that kind of helps get them moving and ready for the remainder of your training. Access group dynamics and energy levels before starting of training. Again, knowing, do you want a low energy, a medium energy, or high energy type of icebreaker? And that can be looked at like based on the timing of the day, or maybe what you're seeing in your audience as you start your training. Um, you might look at your group dynamics too. Is it men, women? Is it what is the ages of the group that you're training? What is it? Is it based on skill level? So looking at your group dynamics. And be sure that your resources are set up and available prior to your training starting. If you need technology, speakers, materials set out, all of those things need to be done before your training starts and before you would begin your icebreaker. And two other ideas here is always be ready to adapt and to have a backup plan. If for some reason the icebreaker that you had in mind doesn't work, can you fall back to a question kind of icebreaker about, like, for example, would you rather do this or do that? So always have some backups to what you want to do for an icebreaker. And my last suggestion is have clear instructions for the icebreaker. Make sure that what you offer as an activity does not create confusion or take time trying to explain it or to execute it, but that your instructions are very clear through a slide, through a verbal instruction. If you think it would be helpful, you can even pass out written instruction that could be on the table that they could look at as they're doing an activity. So these are some of the things that I think we need to consider when selecting our icebreaker and getting prepared for it. Do y'all have any other ideas that you would suggest?
One of the things that I've run into is that I need to be aware of the dialect of my audience, because my Spanish, even though it's Spanish, my Spanish is very different from, let's say, the Rio Grande Valley Spanish, right? Or the Spanish in San Antonio. So that dialect can become a problem if the words that you're using do not have the same meaning or not used in the same way.
I have heard that a couple of specific word examples, and it's hard to get people to be willing to do presentations in Spanish because I've heard that concern quite a few times.
Mm. That makes me also think about, even just when we're talking about them, whether we're formal or informal. I'm very much a Texan, and y'all is very much ingrained in in a lot of my conversations. But I think when we're in front of an audience, and depending upon whether it's informal or formal, how we talk to people and using words like y'all or things definitely falls into like the language that we should consider, and what we think others are expecting from us, and just being mindful. And I'm from San Antonio, so I understand what you mean, the difference between that formal Spanish and the Spanish that is spoken by the community.
Well, and it's that like that formal and informal,
Uh-huh.
depending on your audience, can be disrespectful.
Mhm. What do you mean?
So, you informal, and again, it depends on the area. Informal is when you know somebody, you
Mhm.
have a relationship, whether it's a friendship, family, you are comfortable with that person. If you don't have that type of relationship, then you need to use a formal dialect
Mhm.
because that shows respect.
And that also makes me want to add to this is I like to use name tags. And I think name tags are important because it also lets us know how our audience wants us to speak to them. Like if you're willing to go by first name, or if you have someone who's been in the profession longer and they go by Miss Mary, that allows them to tell us how in an activity and in the training, they want us to acknowledge them or to talk to them. So I think these are really good things to consider. And and those few things that we just talked about really requires us to be in tune with our training group and to be really paying attention to these kind of details and observing our group to see what we think that they need from us as trainers. Okay. How can you align icebreakers with adult learning theory? Okay. So these are our four different types of adult learning theories. Experiential learning, activities that encourage participants to share their experiences and reflect on them. So this first one would be like asking a question about like, what style of learning works for you, and talking about that style of learning and how that helps them to learn a topic. Um, Second would be a problem-centered learning. Participants are presented with a challenge or a problem and they have to solve it together. And I think an example of this one might be like the one that they give is if you're on an island and you had to escape together, what would you need or what would you do? And so we don't really talk too much about islands, but we do talk about classrooms. And so we could be talking about, what would you do to create a classroom? Or one of the ones I like to do is talking about customer service. If you could go on a vacation and you could choose a place, what would you look for in that, let's just say, all-inclusive resort? And it kind of gets the group talking together about some of the qualities that they're looking for, which could then be tied back to what do we look for when we're talking about childcare. Do y'all have any examples of those two that you would want to share?
Well, I was trying to figure out where your FEMA activity would go into place, and I thought probably closely with this problem centered, like I have this one, but I need this, and then they're trying
Uh-huh.
to, so they're working together to find those matches.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Mhm. This third one is goal-oriented learning, and participants can share their professional or personal goals. And I think this one is helpful when we're wanting to better understand uh, why our participants are there. Are they required to be there? Like, are they there partly because they want to be there? Are they thinking about goals? And if they have been asked to think about their goals, like where are they? Like, what do they see themselves? What do they want to work on? And how can we help them in our training to meet that professional or personal goal, or start at least to plan for that? And we know that with TRS or the different types of accreditation and quality improvements, that it is about, our participants having plans for their training and for their professional and personal development that we can build on. And then this fourth one, the relevance to real life, participants can connect through work and or personal experiences. Um, I think here, when we bring people together from different groups and they can connect with each other, they can talk about their work experiences. We can also look to try to help connect through personal experiences by finding what participants' likes and dislikes are, their hobbies, their interests, um, uh, just different things that they do that we could explore together.
I thought was connected with Judith over military
Yep.
prevention.
Yeah. And actually, I didn't even think about this. I have not worked in childcare, but my family has a background of military. So, okay. So we're going to look at some different categories, and we're kind of now moving into the part of the training where we're going to start talking about our actual choices and giving some examples. So icebreaker categories, a few different ones that they can be categorized on: format, question-based, activity-based, and game-based. Question-based would be asking questions and allowing them to answer them. Activity-based could be kind of like, again, the example that I gave, where the participants are trying to define a need and meet the needs together. And then game activities could be something like trivia. Um, um, I just lost what I was going to say. Some of the different game ones that we can use. The purpose for a training, it could be energizing. So recognizing that our training group needs to, if they're low energy, medium, or high, if it's the morning, maybe they're wanting to start off a little bit slow and kind of ease into the training. If it's in the afternoon and it's after lunch, you're probably going to need a more high energy type of activity to help them get through the training or get through the afternoon. If it's informational, which again, tying to what we're trying to teach during our training, it could be team building. And it can also be an opener. And I really liked yesterday in the training where it was mentioned that, there's icebreakers and then there's openers where we just have an activity that allows us to start the training. Our level of engagement can be low, medium, or high. Again, yesterday's training was mentioned where you might start off with, only one or two, an individual activity, or maybe you're having two people talking together and engaging, or you might be willing to go three or four or into like that large group kind of activity where you're asking the full group to give you information back. So there's different levels of engagement that we can look at. Cultural, Judith, I think you did a good job of giving some examples that fall under this, of looking at language, looking at cultures, different types, different families, um, um, just looking at the different dynamics that we have within our group. Professional, we may need to just, as you mentioned, in like a military type of setting, it may need to be just professional. And then lastly, virtual online activities that offer connection engagement. I think we're kind of have moved away from virtual, but still, this is something that we rely on a lot, and we have to find those opportunities to let people to connect and to engage, even in a virtual platform. Would y'all like to add to talking about this different types of formats?
You know what? I was going to add, for my organization that I worked for, we obviously, the majority of the organization is a work from home, right? However, even when we meet virtually, like once we do quarterly in person once a year, and then the rest are virtual. But some of the icebreakers that they use throughout, and it's not just at the beginning, but throughout that quarterly virtual session, because it's like 3 days, right? Or a day and a half, depending on what it is. They like to use either a Menti board where everybody adds words, or they use those like the trivia ones, and then it ranks you based on your accuracy and the speed. And then like people are very much engaged to try and answer those questions right away because they want to be that top number.
Yes. Mhm. And I think those are great suggestions. I am not as familiar with even using those, even though I've done them myself, but being able to do like the polls, and like there's also the word art that you can do where everybody's putting in a word and it creates, or the different like survey type questions where, tell us where you're from, and then everybody gets to put in where they're from, and you can see that, or what is your profession, or what is your role, or learning about people through those different survey type questions. I think those are very good. Okay, so this is where we are going to create our own icebreaker toolbox and go through. These are some ideas that I found. And Judith, as you just suggested, this is definitely by no means a all-inclusive list. There's other ideas like the ones that you suggested for virtual or also being used in person. So some of the classical ones is two truths and a lie, this or that, would you rather. And one of the recent ones I did with would you rather, I like to use it with child development because I compare child development to seashells, and kind of like when you can go snorkeling or scuba diving. Like, would you rather snorkel or scuba dive? When you're snorkeling, you kind of see things from that kind of surface level, like you would see like a group of children. But when you scuba dive, you go down deep and you really get to explore. And so it was kind of a fun icebreaker to ask the group, like, would you rather snoot I can't get my words out, to snorkel or to scuba dive? And then we talked about that, and then tying it together into what it would look like to talk about child development in 1 hour, where that's really not a lot of information for that topic, but we had the opportunity to kind of look from the surface, but also kind of go deep and to explore more. So thinking about those type of questions and how you can relate. I like the would you rather questions a lot.
Yeah, and I think that it allows for people to, sometimes they are hesitant to share, or they may not feel, I mean, it's a less vulnerable way of deciding and picking one because you've kind of promoted that.
Mm-hmm. And another similar one is to stand up or sit down. Have the audience stand or the group stand up, and if something applies to them, then they sit down, or sit down and stand up. So that's a good way. Depending upon the line, and if you're needing movement, you could also create a invisible line or create some sort of a line, and then have your training group on the left side, and if it applies to them, they step over to the right. So you can also use it with a line, or you can stand up or sit down as a way to have them do questions. And if you need questions for icebreakers, you can do like an internet search, and you will find lots of questions that are about people's interest, that are just really good suggestions, as well as being able to choose from professional type ideas. Crossover questions, desert island question, like if you could only have so many items with you on a desert island, what would they be? And then another one that is kind of a classical one is kind of like a meeting bingo. And you can do that by having different interests, or different things about people that you would want each other to know. And so, for example, it could say, um, I lived I have traveled outside of Texas. And then your training group would go and find somebody who's lived outside of Texas and mark that off on like a bingo. Or I have a dog, or I have a son. So you can come up with different things on the bingo card and let them interact to find out about each other. Okay. So those are some classical ones. Some energizing ones could be like physical challenges. I like to look at YouTube for the minute to win it kind of videos. Are y'all familiar with those?
Mm-hmm.
You can look at doing some group games. When I saw this, I think you can do some creative games where it involves like movement. You could also even look at doing some sort of, depending upon the size of your group, like board games would be another option. Charades or Pictionary. You could do trivia quizzes, and you could use audio. You can do songs, you can do clips from a movie. You could also do information like from books. One of the things I thought about is like with early childhood education, doing like some of the songs that we like to sing, the having like the recordings of them. Has anyone tried the human knot?
Yes. Like you
How
hold
did that
hands.
work? Uh-huh.
Um, Not as well in person as it sounded like on paper, but there
Uh-huh.
was one that did surprise me that worked well. It was where they did team building and they had like ropes on the ground in a circle, and then you had to like get into the circle, and then the music stopped, and then the ropes were taken away, and so then you needed to get 2 or 3 people into a circle, and then ropes were taken away until finally there were just two, for the two groups, that because of the amount of people that we had, and then there was a task for them to get out of the room. And I thought for sure it was gonna be a safety hazard, but they worked really well together. They were laughing, they thought it was hilarious, and they shuffled out all together, staying as a close group. And I was like, how is this working with pandemic? But I mean, it was after that, but I should have
Uh-huh.
been through like considerations of what people might think about getting that close to other people.
And
Um,
so tell me again, so the rope was on the ground or it was
Yeah, they started off like with links of rope that just were made into circles, and then
okay.
one person would go around and take up, let the music start, stop, and then you progressively, kind of how Linda talked about, you work individual and then pairs and small group and then whole group.
Uh-huh.
That's the process that it went. You kind of had safety with the small in your circle, and those got taken away. You had to join more people. You had to join more people, and then once you got into large group, then you had a task.
And I think, another idea with that, with the rope would also be like hula hoops, being able to, I mean, if you want to carry the hula hoops, that sometimes can be a lot to hold. But like you said, it's kind of like like a cakewalk,
Yeah,
basically,
yeah.
kind of what we're looking at
Let's put in a
some
duffel
ways.
bag, and the presenter just brought them and set it up before.
Yeah. But ropes would be a lot easier to carry. Um, Speed meeting can be a fun and energetic way, and that is basically where in the group you would line people up, and they could basically each person would have the opportunity to talk to other people in the meeting, or in the training group for the amount of time that you set, and they would have questions to ask each other like, where are you from, what do you do, maybe they ask a fun question about interest or ask a question about family or something. But in that speed meeting, within a very set amount of time, you could learn a lot about people within the group. And I think for speed meeting, it would really be looking at like, what is the purpose? Like if you're in a group of 40 people who are most likely not going to see each other again, I'm not sure that speed meeting would be something that would necessarily be the best use of time. But if we're at a center and we're maybe wanting to do team building, an opportunity for them to, have questions that they would have to talk to through with each other kind of quickly. And its relationship building could be really good. What do y'all think about speed meeting? What would you think would be the best use for it?
I mean, it's a good idea, especially I would use something like that, more of a impromptu type of thing when you're beginning to lose them because it's after lunch and you got stuck with that after lunch training and they're tired,
Uh-huh.
to get them up and moving, you know. For the next 5 minutes, we are going to do a speed meeting and go to your partner and provide a question, and then that they can talk about or something like that. But that would be great for that type of scenario because after lunch, yeah, it gets it gets sleepy.
You do get sleepy. Yes. Okay. The next one here is scavenger hunt, which I think we're probably all familiar with. But that's something you can do in person where you can have them take something out of their purses, find things out of their purses. Or it can be done virtually where you ask somebody to go find something in their house and they bring it back and then they get to share about it. Inside purses could be something that is meaningful to them that they have with them. So that's an opportunity. Um, the word chain is where you start off with a word and then everybody adds a word. So, for example, if you start with the word cheese, then somebody does cheddar and then Swiss, and then you continue on and you try to you eliminate people by them not having a word that is within that related group of words. Are y'all familiar with that as an activity?
I haven't done the eliminate because I don't know how people feel about that, but we did it where it was like
Okay.
telephone,
Uh-huh.
where they have to say a word and then the next person connects a word to that word. And then at the end of it, you hear what the original word was. First, you end it with what the final word was, and then the original word to see kind of how people connect those things together. I thought that was kind of fun.
Okay.
Something that was topic. So we did it with a phonological awareness activity. So that it was like wordplay, you know.
Well, and actually you brought up a good point. I hadn't thought about. Yeah, probably eliminating would not be a good idea. I think that might be maybe that's left for like the when you're
Book.
like with a group of teenagers and playing a game.
Maybe competitive. I have stopped pretty much door prizes most of the time because people are happy about attending and then they're sad they didn't win. So instead of everybody happy by the time they're done, you've got one person happy and then
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
but I have given tickets before, like subtly as I'm walking around, people who have shared, you know, you're kind of like, and then I've had things out on a table. So they've kind of earned it versus door prizes. And when people see that they're getting a ticket, even without knowing why, they're like, they start kind of raising their hand and volunteering more.
Okay. And I think a really good one is stickers. The last training I did, I found so many stickers at the dollar store and I just laid them out and everybody left with like a handful of stickers and they were excited to take them to the classroom. So that was kind of a fun thing to do
Fun to
too.
get something when you go to training, even if, you know, I mean, yeah, I know it
Um,
comes out of the budget, but
this next one is called Name Game, and you can say a name and interesting fact. I read that you could ask people to talk about their name and like how their parents named them. Um, so that might be something, or you could ask them to say something with a letter that starts the same as their name. So, for example, Cheryl starts with a C. So mine might be cute Cheryl or crazy Cheryl. So that allows them to kind of come up with a fun word with their name and lets you know a little bit about them. So, a name game. This next one here is Jenga. And
mm.
instead of just the game Jenga, but you would actually put questions on the blocks. And then as they are pulling the blocks, they can answer those questions. And this last one, kind of somewhat similar, would be like question cubes and balls, where you've labeled a cube or a ball with questions, and that's passed on, and then among the participants, and then they're able to answer whatever they land with. So those are a few examples of some energizing type of icebreakers. Is there any that y'all would add to that list that you're familiar with? I thought this was a pretty good list.
Yep.
Okay. I did read about one this week that I thought would be fun to try, and that has to do with child staff ratios. And the this could be either an icebreaker or an activity depending upon the training that you're doing. But to have what do you call them? Bean bags, like little ones, little bags. And you basically start with a person like throwing one, and then you give them two. And they're trying to basically juggle three, then they juggle four. And then you allow a second person to come in and start helping them. And now you've got two people throwing five. And then you go on to eight, and then you continue on. And I think it's a really good way because they can see like the difference of a ratio where you're looking at 1 to 4, or you're going, 2 to 8, 2 to 10. And so it helps to start to build that understanding of ratios that I mean we see it and we feel it when we're in the classroom, but also being able to have a visual that shows it's really hard to juggle that much, on your own, and how together we need each other to support each other to be able to provide that quality care. So that was I thought was a fun idea for something energizing. um,
That's awesome. I need to leave because I have a meeting at 1, but thank you so much. I appreciate
Okay.
you.
Okay. And we're about to finish up, but okay. Thanks for coming, Melissa.
Mhm.
Judith, do you still have a few minutes? We're almost done.
I do.
Okay. All right. So then this next one is more about the group and kind of collaborative type of icebreakers. And one was a group sculpture. And I read this in two different ways. One would be to get some items and have a group try to create like a little sculpture with whatever was available to them. So I think as trainers, we could, in the front of the room, like we could put out rubber bands and paper clips, maybe some other like little random type things. And then they would take whatever they have and together they would work to create a little sculpture. Another icebreaker showed where people themselves created the sculptures, like using their own bodies and created some sort of a sculpture. So I think depending upon what kind of activity, what movement or what interaction you were hoping to get, you could look that up, group sculpture. The second one here is storytelling. And I think this is an opportunity for uh, to start like with wait, let's see. Storytelling was, I think, just an opportunity to share stories. The next one here is a sentence by sentence. And this is where you start off with a sentence and you might say, I got to work early. And then the next person says, I got to work early and it was snowing. And so each person starts to add on a sentence and it kind of guides the story. So that was kind of a fun one that you could do. And then the next one here is shared experiences. And I think we've talked a little bit about this throughout the training, is giving our participants the opportunities to see what they have in common. So that could be done in small group questions. That could be done as a large group. Some of these different strategies that we've talked about as ways for people to see that others are connecting with them with the same similar type of experiences. This next one here, I actually mentioned it already, but the story behind the name. And that's where we could ask members to talk a little bit about how their parents came up with their name, if there's a story behind it. And this next one is a Zoom background challenge. Have you ever done the background challenge? So what you could do if you have a Zoom meeting is allow your participants to decide what their background would be. And it could be based on like, maybe where would you like to travel to? And so then the background of the Zoom could have maybe a beach or some form of a background like that. Or it could be a theme. It could be a fiesta. And so everybody then has like a fiesta background. So that would be like something fun you could do. Maybe if you're doing like a Zoom meeting during the holidays, it could have a holiday theme. And this last one that I have is puzzle solving. And I think this has a couple different opportunities that you could do. It could be like a crossword puzzle where in groups they're getting together and they're completing like a crossword. It could also be a actual physical puzzle where they're taking the different pieces together and they're trying to solve it together. And I think what I like about puzzles is you realize that every piece matters in a puzzle. And so you could do where they complete the puzzle, and or you could also do where one piece is missing and then there's always that message about how it's important that we have all the pieces and that we have everybody contributing and being a part of the training or a part of the work that we're doing. And then you can always finish the puzzle by giving the last piece. So these are just some of the different icebreakers that I found under classical, energizing, and kind of supporting groups. I also want to add that we should always take time for self-care and remind our participants that if they need breathing exercises, like being able to build that into your training, or maybe it needs to be stretching. Like we mentioned, some trainings will be after lunch. So maybe they need to stretch like a giraffe, or they need to move around like, a certain animal. whatever type of movement that they need to help them to be able to refocus and to actively participate in the trainings that we're offering. And last is just to say thank you for attending the training today and to see, is there any questions that you have or any ideas that you want to add to the training that we talked about today?
No, I like it. For my organization, we do a lot of one-on-one trainings. So icebreakers can help, but after a while, you work with the same people for a couple of years. They're not, I would say, they're not as effective when you've just done it, but we still are required to train, be out there, or in El Paso. UTEP has the Early Matters El Paso, and they are always asking us to participate either a conference or their learning academies. So this is excellent for those type of scenarios because then, it gets them up and moving.
I would agree. And I think even, with ongoing trainings, even with the same group, if you can change the different content that you have related to the icebreaker, it can still be helpful. Like, for example, like the Jenga blocks, if you're in person. I know you said that y'all are a lot of times um, virtual, but I remember during the time I was virtual, like we had one training where everybody showed a picture of their family, or we had a training where everybody showed a picture of their dog, or something that was unique to them that they might want to share. Again, vacations and or adventures that they might like to do. So I think when it comes to the virtual trainings, being able to come up with a variety. One of the ones I did that I thought was kind of fun is it was a summer training, and I did Shark Week. And so I had 10 interesting facts about sharks for Shark Week. So I still think that there's an opportunity, even with ongoing trainings that we provide to the same group, to try to use these some of these strategies to make them fun and make people want to be a part of it. So
Yeah.
well, thank you for joining. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop my recording. Let's see if I can get there. And I'll share. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and end and make sure it stops. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.